Hello and welcome back. Hope you are good, doing well. So we are having dollar yen chart. It's setting up for a nice opportunity all the way back to this area. So if we're gonna look at the calendar, so we are having inflation numbers which are going to be released on Wednesday. CPI monthly basis and CPI on yearly basis and core. And next day on Thursday, so we are going to see PPI numbers, core PPI and PPI. Okay, so very important data for this week is going to be released. So, and ahead of that, we are already having some pressure on it, on the dollar against the yen. Dollar is just going down. We had non-farm payroll numbers last week, which wasn't good, right? And that's causing dollar yen to continue to keep dragging lower. So also Bank of Ministry of Finance from Japan, they were also watching dollar yen pushing more higher. All right, they were not comfortable with the dollar yen at 145. We have already seen back in September intervention here at this area from Ministry of Finance with $62 billion. All right, so we have seen $62 billion intervention here and here at these areas. Okay, so that was the previously where they sold dollar, and we have seen aggressive sell-off over there. And the move came after having again tightening policy from Fed that caused the dollar to again gain against the yen, and also ultra loose monetary policy from Bank of Japan that caused the dollar to continue pushing more higher. Okay, so that was the previous picture. Now we need to talk about the next, what can happen next. So why we are expecting this move to come. So it seems that the drop has already begun over there on the dollar against the yen, which can drive it to go all the way up to this previous low, or maybe further low up to 120 in longer term. Okay, but before looking at this chart, I'm gonna talk about why we're expecting this move to happen, right? And what if it go for another push for upside? So are we going to still look for this to drop more lower in case if price again test that intervention area? Still we are going to look this longer term drop on it, or we should change. So right now I'm not anticipating that move, but in case if that happen, this is not going to change. All right, so the sell-off, longer term sell-off opportunity on dollar against the yen is not going to change. So the first of all, what we are expecting is to inflation to drop. Okay, so I'm going to talk about the inflation chart in a while, but before going to look at that, I'm gonna look at the inflation on inflation, what's happening with the Chinese inflation right now. Okay, this is the PPI chart. All right, so Chinese PPI chart, there we can see that PPI has aggressively gone below 50. All right, and we have seen that below in negative territory back in March 2020. All right, and then again in 2016, there we can see, and then again back in 2009. All right, and then in 2000 or 1998 or 1999, we can say that. All right, so this is alarming for the China, right? So we may see stimulation from China to bring the inflation back. So what's happening with their headline inflation and their core inflation? All right, if I'm gonna look at the inflation chart, all right, so the Chinese inflation chart, this is the Chinese inflation. All right, so headline inflation, headline numbers also dropped last night at 0. All right, so again testing the historical lows. So next couple of inflation reports, we may see that the headline inflation can drop significantly below 0. All right, so highly likely it's going to go lower. So if I'm going to look at the core inflation now, what core inflation is doing right now. The core inflation is also at 0.40. Means that the core inflation is also falling. So where is the interest rate? Interest rates are falling, all right, but still higher. So 3.50. PPI negative territory, all right. So headlines 0. Headline inflation numbers are at 0. Core 0.40, and interest rate are still higher, extremely higher, so 3.55. So we may see further rate cuts from China. So this is basically telling us that what we may see in the rest of the world, all right. So the trend is very much similar like that in the US. Okay, so the inflation trend is very much similar. There we can see that the inflation, headline inflation, dropped. Okay, we haven't seen extreme inflation in the China, but the trend is very much similar to the downside. So that's the Chinese, inflation. We can see that what's happening with the Chinese inflation right now. Let's get back to the US. Okay, so the data which is going to be important and why we're expecting the dollar to drop. Okay, so Chinese inflation is telling us that we are going to see very, very strong disinflationary wind in the world. All right, and the Western countries can also import that disinflation from China in coming months as well. So if I'm going to look at this chart, this is basically the interest rate. Okay, US interest rate. So Fed fund rate, we can say that. So it's standing at 5.25. And if I'm going to look at the core inflation, okay, so the core inflation is standing at 5.30. All right, and if I'm going to look at the headline inflation is standing at significant downtrend has already begun over there. Okay, so at 4. And the next week, on Wednesday, the expectation is that the inflation, the forecast number is going to be at 3.1. Okay, so if I'm going to look at that there, 3.1. So the forecast is that the headline numbers also going to fall up to 3.1. Okay, and in case if it falls below 3.1, let's say 250 or close to 250, all right, that's going to be a significant drop in headline inflation numbers. But the trend is telling us that what's happening with the headline numbers, because the headline inflation is telling us what the trend is telling us what is going to happen next. So if I'm going to pull out the PPI on it, all right, so PPI has significantly gone up to 1, right? So 1.10, and there is a good chance that on Wednesday or on Thursday, PPI number can even fall, below 0. Very much similar like the Chinese PPI, which I have just shown you, and gone up to -5 territory. Okay, so the Chinese inflation is telling us what's the trend. Yeah, because China is a global growth engine, and what's happening with their growth. And the trend is also telling us in the US inflation that what's happening. The PPI is sharply falling, aggressively falling, and headline numbers are just following. Headline inflation is just following the PPI, and behind that we can see that the core is also falling. And there is the Fed fund rate. All right, so the interest rate, Fed is holding interest rate at 5.30. So what we should expect, there might be another interest rate hike from the Fed, all right, in July. I'm not expecting that. In case if we are going to see significant drop in inflation on Wednesday, as I said, that if it falls below 3, then we may not see another hike, all right. And the reason why Fed is so aggressive, the comments are still so aggressive, hawkish. The reason is the PPI. PPI is still 5.30, right? That's why they are saying that they're going to raise for another time or 2 times, or going to hold their whole rates for longer term. But regardless of this, the core inflation, okay, the PPI is telling us that what is going to happen with the headline inflation, what is going to happen with the core inflation, and what is going to happen with the interest rate. Okay, these trends are telling us that Fed is going to cut the rates very soon. All right, so we are going to see that the Fed is going to flip out. All right, so how that, let's just look at the lag now. All right, so if I'm gonna pull out the US money supply chart on it. Okay, so if I'm gonna look at this area, this circle, we can see over there that the inflation significantly dropped back in March 2020 there. Okay, inflation went lower than what Fed did. Yeah, so all these are inflation lines except this blue. So these PPI, CPI, and core CPI. Yes, all dropped. Fed cut the interest rate aggressively back to zero. All right, and then printed a lot of money over there. Okay, this is a money supply. That's telling us that what happened with the money supply. So they printed almost from there to there. If we're gonna look at this from there to there. All right, so almost 5 trillion, more than 5 trillion, or 5 trillion, we can say that. Okay, so they printed almost 5 trillion from there to there. So when they printed that much money, what happened with that money? That money brought inflation. Okay, so that money, they printed that money back in March, started to print that money back in March 2020. That money brought inflation. PPI went higher, all right? This, yellow line. So PPI went higher, CPI went higher, okay? And then core inflation went higher. So all three inflationary lines went up aggressively. Then what happened after that? Okay, we have seen that the Fed started to raise the interest rate. They started to catch up the inflation, all right? They started to fight with inflation. All right, now what's happening right now? That's the question. All right, the fight with inflation is almost over. Okay, so I'm gonna pull out another chart on it, dollar yen chart. So there we can see that dollar yen chart also started to rise. This is the dollar yen chart. Okay, this chart, this color, purple. So what happened first? We have seen money supply went up, then inflation went up. Then dollar started to price in for higher interest rate. Dollar started to rise for the higher interest rate. Dollar went up. And then, Fed started to raise the interest rate. All right. Now, similar cycle is going to be repeated again. So what we have seen, money supply has also significantly dropped from that top. Okay. So, money supply started to shrink from 21 trillion to went up to a trillion. Okay, so we haven't seen at the same pace drop at the same pace, the pace which we have seen here. Okay, they have printed a lot of money, but they have they haven't we are not having the same pace for decline in the money supply. So money supply shrinking, all right, so dropping, inflation is dropping, all three inflation started to drop, and dollar yen also found its top over there. Okay, or we can say that after the Bank of Ministry of Finance intervention, dollar yen went lower as well. So that's why I said that the dollar yen bigger picture still gonna remain to the downside. So we are not expecting dollar yen to rise further aggressively for more upside. So we are expecting dollar yen to just follow the trend like other other charts are doing. All right, so money supply shrinking, inflation is falling. Right, Fed is still holding the rates, but soon once they're going to start to cut the interest rate and going to start to follow the inflation, okay, dollar yen will also start to drop lower to the downside. So that's why the inflation report is very important. And in case if we are going to see significant drop on inflation on Wednesday, then we may see continuation to the downside. Okay, to the downside on the dollar yen. And if dollar yen keep falling the way we have seen aggressive drop at this area, yeah, that driven by the inflation report, we have seen intervention. And you know, we have seen aggressive sell-off over there. So there was a reason for the big investor to come into the market at this place, because that sell-off, you know, was backed by intervention from the central bank and the Ministry of Finance as well. Okay, so that's why we have seen that degree sell-off over there, and also inflation report dropped. Inflation dropped over there. So if we are going to see similar kind of sell-off over here, all right, then look for this to continue to keep dropping all the way back to this area. So we haven't got any intervention yet from the Ministry of Finance, all right, from Japan, but they have already intervened in the market, but verbally, not physically. They haven't sold some dollars or like that. Last time they sold with 62 billion, but they haven't intervened yet, but they have intervened verbally. So inflation going to drop significantly. You are looking this to continue to keep dragging more lower. Okay, now let's talk about that. How? All right, how you can try to get into the market. So price is already dropping lower. Okay, so this is where you are paying close attention. This is the place where you wanna put your stop loss just behind these areas. So it's falling, dollar is falling right now. Dollar is going down. Okay, we are not having any strength on the yen yet. Okay, but dollar is going down, so correction is just happening over there on this 1 hour time frame. You are looking against similar kind of correction. Okay, if you see that the 1 hour time frame correction like this or like this is going to appear over there ahead of that Wednesday inflation data, okay, then you are looking breakout, very much similar like breakout. You can put your stop behind these areas, or if you want to be comfortable, then you can use this place, this top, for stop loss. Okay, but depending what kind of it will depend what kind of correction going to be over there. Are we going to see a small correction like 1 hour time frame correction is going to get slightly deeper, or 4 hour time frame correction is going to appear over there? All right, whatever kind of correction is going to appear over there. So looking to watch that correction from 1 hour time frame. Okay, if that 1 hour time frame correction gets bigger, goes to 4 hour, watch that. If that even gets bigger and goes to daily time frame correction, all right, you're looking for that to break out aggressively and continue to keep pushing more lower. All right, so basically, or in simple terms, you're looking price to get back within the 1 hour moving averages, and those 1 hour moving averages to hold, and then price to drop aggressively to the downside. All right, so if I'm gonna look at this 4 hour time frame, okay, price has already broken down those moving averages, and in case if it gets back on 4 hour time frame, gets back to these 4 hour time frame correction moving averages, you're looking it to hold, and price to not break above that top and break out and continue to keep dragging more lower. All right, so that's the dollar yen. You are looking for that dollar yen chart to continue to keep dragging more lower, as I have just shown you that the inflation is dropping in the US. Yeah, so as long as inflation keeps falling in the US, okay, so we may see policy a change from the Fed maybe at the end of this year. Okay, as we have seen that the price dollar yen started to price in for rate hikes. So similarly, dollar yen may start to price in for rate cuts from the bank of from the Fed. All right, so thank you. We'll see you back again in another analysis. Until then, bye.